Why don't we get started? So welcome everybody to the last IDE seminar of the year before the holiday. It's been a great semester with lots of great speakers, and this is going to be no different. Today we have our very own Zanele Munyikwa, who's going to talk about understanding generative AI and creative work, especially in copywriting. And Zanele is a PhD candidate here. And she's one of our best, so we're in for a treat. You can have your videos on or off. I'm going to turn mine off because I'm going to eat, which is quite distracting. Please feel free to interrupt Zanele with questions. Just unmute your microphone if you like, and get her attention. And we can have a great seminar. So Zanele, I will let you take it away from here. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the great introduction. So as you said, I'm going to be presenting a project about understanding generative AI and creative work. And this is joint work with one of my advisors, Eric Brynjolfsson. And as he said, we can, if you guys have any comments, questions as I'm going through the slides, I'm happy to answer them live. Really welcome your feedback on this project that I've been working on. So I'll start with this quote by J.K. Rowling, who, as you guys may know, is the author of Harry Potter books. And she says, imagination is not only the uniquely human capacity to envision that which is not, and therefore the fountain of all invention and innovation, but is also the power that enables us to empathize with humans whose experiences we've never shared. So in this, she really emphasizes this idea of imagination as being uniquely human. And this is really interesting considering the AI models that have recently been improving. And as they've gotten progressively larger, they've begun to surpass major human performance benchmarks. And this includes tasks that are both previously considered easier for computers to accomplish, and also tasks that we've considered to be the realm of what is uniquely human. So this is including creative tasks. So, for example, generative AI has shifted this discussion around machine creativity in the graphic design space. For example, with models such as Midjourney have shown remarkable results in generating creative and animated images. So for example, in this set of images that reimagines Hogwarts from different countries, such as Antarctica or Egypt. So you may look at these images and say these are mostly derivative artworks based off of J.K. Rowling's original idea. And this opens some really interesting questions about copyright and what is new creative artwork. But regardless, there are open questions about how generative AI is going to impact this type of creative work. So just to zoom out a bit, the reason that this is interesting for economists is, again, that earlier phases of automation primarily affected tasks that were classified as routine and which involved explicitly easily programmable steps of sequences. And the emergence of generative AI models has marked a shift towards impacting non-routine cognitive tasks. So this includes knowledge work, white-collar work, and also includes, which we'll focus on today, creative work, such as graphic design and advertising. So specifically, the setting of my study is the copywriting space. And this is an industry that has some of the earliest adoption of these models. So there are many startups over the past 3 years within this content creation space, mainly copywriting, that have been gaining momentum. And this is interesting considering that, again, advertising has been a space that has been thought of as requiring human work and really has not been considered previously a space in which there's been a great deal of automation. And there's this quote from Leo Burnett, who was an advertising executive, and he said the work of advertising is warmly and immediately human. And this is because it deals with human needs, wants, dreams, and hopes. Nevertheless, large companies like Estee Lauder and others are already adopting this technology. And in our chapter on foundation models and economic impacts, we argue that this is largely due to the generative and interactive capabilities of this technology. And one thing that is particularly interesting is the space in which humans and AI are working together to create creative works. Overall, there's a lot of speculation that generative AI is transforming the copywriting industry, alongside concern about what this is going to mean for working copywriters and the industry as a whole. So in terms of existing related work, there are 3 sets of findings that I think are closely related to this paper. So this first is a paper in 2021 that generates ads, health-related ads, and finds that algorithmically generated ads resulted in enhanced efficiency and effectiveness. And this was driven by higher predicted click-through rates and relevance as measured by text analysis. But this was not specifically a generative AI system, but a more general paper that looked at generative AI found that it has potential to increase worker productivity. And both of these papers found there's particular benefit for less skilled workers. Finally, there is a recent paper that found that AI assistance with the handling of the initial well-codified repetitive portion of the task was more likely to increase employees' productivity in solving subsequent higher level problems of the task, with particular benefit for higher skilled workers. So this is an interesting finding, considering that we're looking at this creative writing space. So these prior papers really set the stage for the research questions that we ask in this study. So here we're looking at a generative AI system, and we want to see how it impacts the writing of copywriters in terms of their productivity, their job satisfaction while writing, the quality of the ads that they produce. And also we want to see if there's differences by experience level, given the prior work that has shown this difference by experience level. So in terms of the experimental design, we have 3 treatments. So the first treatment is no AI assistance, and we'll call that system 1. And system 1 is basically a plain text editor with no AI assistance. System 2 is what we call slight or medium augmentation, and it's basically a super autocomplete capability backed by GPT-3. And system 3 is more high level of augmentation, and this is essentially a set of example ads that writers can edit. So I'll go through and show you each of the systems. So this is system 1. So as you can see on the left-hand side, the writers see the products that they're supposed to advertise, write an advertisement for. And on the right-hand side, there is a text editor. And so in system 1, they just use the text editor and they write the ad in the text editor and submit it when they're done. In system 2, we can see that the writers have this autocomplete function where they're able to hit tab, or they can click get suggestions in the corner. And this allows them to get the next set of tokens given the writing that they already have in the text box. So they can basically interact with the system in this setting. Finally, we have the highest level of augmentation. And in system 3, we see that they can click at the bottom here, example ads, and a list of example ads will come up, and then they can basically import any of these ads and then edit them in order to create their own ad. So in terms of outcomes, the benefits of the systems that we built is that we're able to have rich data about how the individuals are interacting with the system. So each has a video and also trace data about their interaction with the system. So this gives us information like time spent writing ads, the number of times that they query the model, etc. And we also get a series of other reported measures about the writing using text analysis, such as word count, vocabulary diversity, sentiment, and emotion analysis. We also conduct a series of surveys of the writers before and after they write with each of the systems. And then we also get feedback from the Etsy sellers. So in this study, we recruit a set of Etsy sellers to advertise products from their stores. And then the Etsy sellers review the products, review the ads written by the copywriters. So they give a creativity rating, tell which they think are the top ads, also veto ads if they consider them to either be non-factual about their product, or if they believe that there is something offensive or something that doesn't represent their brand of their store. Finally, we look at ad performance on the Facebook ad platform. So the two outcomes we look at are click-through rate and cost per click. So to preview the findings, I first want to give a qualitative sense of the feedback we got from copywriters in the surveys. One copywriter said, "I really enjoyed the whole process. I felt using the text suggestion tool was incredibly intuitive. Just hit tab and get a bunch of suggestions that you can use as is, as a jumping off point, or just ignore entirely. It was a very cool experience." Another writer said, "Having the suggestions and prompts from AI definitely made things easier. As a copywriter, I haven't used these tools before and I had to come up with ad copy on my own. Definitely after trying the AI suggestions, I'd say it made my job easier." So these are responses that copywriters gave, and this is generally positive feedback, but not all copywriters had positive feedback from using the AI systems. For example, one copywriter said, "Again, I feel the AI generated copy is a bit cheesy." So this is really a critique of the quality of the writing that the AI generated. And so this is an important factor to consider. So we're interested both in how the AI system, use of the AI system impacts the time it takes to produce the ads. So this is how we're thinking about productivity, but also part of productivity is the quality of the ads that are produced. So that's why we look at both sets of outcomes. In terms of the quantitative findings, we find that more augmentation leads to less time spent. So writers in system 2 took 81% of the time of the no AI condition, and writers in system 3 took 67% of the time of the no AI condition. We also find that more augmentation leads to less feelings of ownership. So we survey the writers about how much ownership they feel over the ads that they wrote. And this is related to what one copywriter said, was that before they had to write ads on their own, and now they're writing ads in partnership with the AI. We find no difference in terms of benefit by experience. And interestingly, we find that less augmentation leads to a higher click-through rate. So the human written ads in the study have a higher click-through rate when it run on the Facebook ad platform. However, this is interesting given the context of the fact that when we look at observable measures of the writing through text analysis and also third-party ratings by prolific survey participants, we see that observable measures of the writing are very similar. So this is somewhat of a puzzle to wonder what is driving this difference in click-through rate. So to back up a bit, let me talk a bit about more about the experimental design. So what happens is the copywriters enter the platform, and then they do a series of 3 writing sessions. So this is a crossover study. So writers write in every condition in each of system 1, system 2, and system 3. So during the writing session, they go through a tutorial video to show them how do they interact with the system. Then they write 3 ads for a randomly assigned product A from an Etsy seller. They do a short survey on their experience writing ads with the system. Then they do a series of ads for product B, and then a short survey on writing ads with the system again. So in each writing session, they're basically writing for 2 products in the same system. Finally, there's a final survey where we survey participants after they've gone through the system about their attitudes towards technology and AI. And we did this after this survey so that we don't impact any of their survey responses previously. So as I said, it's a crossover experiment. So just to be a bit more clear, writers write in every setting, and we randomize the order in which they write with AI. So we have basically 6 groups, and each of the 6 groups are the potential orderings of which order they write in each of the systems. And so the reason we do this is so that we can then measure and estimate carryover effects. So for example, what's the impact of writing with the human with AI examples system and then writing with the human only system? And as I mentioned, in each period, they write for 2 products. So this results in 65 copywriters that write 390 writing sessions. At each writing session, they write 6 ads. So this results in 1,170 written ads. We also have 7 sellers and 17 products. So looking at the sample, though we were hoping to make sure that we had an even distribution in terms of years of experience, age, gender, race, and ever written ads. And this was important given that the way that our study was designed, we were hiring writers on Upwork. So you might be concerned that maybe only inexperienced writers are willing to participate in the experiment, but we don't find that to be the case. Oops. Okay, and so in terms of the analytical strategy, we're just doing a regression model within writer analysis, which we're able to do because each writer writes in every condition. And we use writer and session fixed events. So looking at this regression, this is just an example where our outcome is time text change, which is basically the time it takes for writers to write ads. And for each of our analyses, we'll basically be changing this outcome variable and looking at the various outcomes to see how the condition, which is the system, so which treatment assignment the writer is in, how this impacts the outcome variable. So starting with session level outcomes, we see that writers in system 2 had an 81% decrease in time spent writing ads, and writers in system 3 had a 67%, took 67% of the time of the human condition to write ads. We also see this reduction in ownership. So both in system 2 and system 3, increased augmentation led to decreased feelings of ownership. We also see in system 2 that there is a slight increase in terms of satisfaction and in terms of enjoyment when writing with the system. Finally, we see that there is an increased amount of ease, with the highest amount of ease reported for system 2 and a slightly lower amount of ease reported for system 3. This is particularly interesting given that in system 3, there's a higher level of augmentation and there's this increased reduction in time. However, we also see that kind of the ease is kind of flipped. So writers find it a bit easier to write in system 2 than in system 3. Next, we'll look at ad level outcomes. So I'm just going to quickly go over these. These are results of ad text analysis. And so we see that the word count for example ads is slightly lower. The readability score for autocomplete is slightly higher. So readability score is essentially from the Flesch-Kincaid score. And readability grade is basically the grade level that you need to be at in order to read the text. So we can see that for system 2 is a bit more readable, and system 3 is a bit less readable. We then do an analysis using a BERT transformer regression model and measure the sentiment of the ads that were written. And so we compare these in terms of the conditions that each of the ads were written in. And we see that there is not a substantial difference between ads that are written in each of the conditions, though there's potentially kind of a slight, in terms of positive sentiment, there's potentially a difference in terms of negative and neutral sentiment. And so we look at specifically the emotion analysis of the ads. So we can see that for disgust, there's this difference in terms of human and example ads versus autocomplete ads. And then we can see also that for the sadness emotion, human ads have a higher rate of use of sadness. Next, we'll discuss results in terms of experience. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but the general takeaway here is that we have 3 variables in our data that measure the experience of workers. And I'm going to focus on this one of the variables here in the presentation, which is ever written Facebook ads. And this is a variable that basically writers just report whether they've experienced writing ads for Facebook in the past. This is the most straightforward, and the results are consistent across the measures. So here we can see that, as we might expect, writers that have experience writing Facebook ads in the past take less time to write Facebook ads in the study. They take on average about 1.8 minutes less writing. But if we break that out by condition, we don't see a difference in terms of the treatment effect. This is based off of both visually looking at the graph and also a regression analysis where we interact whether they've ever written Facebook ads with oh, I guess I'm seeing that there are questions in the chat. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll get to them at the end. Okay. Yes, so if we look at so we see that there is not a difference in terms of treatment effect, and this is based off of this graph and also a regression analysis where we interact whether they've ever written ads with the condition the ads were written in. Next, we look at ad performance, and for ad performance, we see that basically this is the results from looking at running the ads on Facebook in an A/B/split test. And we see that human written ads have a higher median and mean click-through rate. And this is as compared to autocomplete, which is the next lowest or highest, and then example written ads. And so we're curious about why this is and what is driving this higher click-through rate. We explored first was looking at the sentiment and emotional valence of the ads. And as I mentioned, we found that they were not statistically significant. We also looked at third-party ratings from survey participants on prolific and have them rate the ads on creativity and also also categorize the ads. So we identified a series of metrics that we found in the marketing literature about what drives the effectiveness of ads, and also included a few measures that were recommended by Facebook, which is one was whether or not the ad included a call to action. So saying click through and buy this product, for example. So authority is basically whether the ad appeals to authority or expert figure. Simple is basically yes or no question. Does the ad use simple language? Scarcity is whether the ad appeals to scarcity. So, offered for a limited time or there's a limited quantity, etc. So here we can see that there is this, mostly the action is really in system 2, and we're seeing that there is this slight increase in appeals to authority, though it's very small, and a big decrease in terms of whether the ad uses simple language, which is interesting as this is a bit in the opposite direction of what is found in looking at the readability scores and measures. So just as going back to this overview of findings, as I mentioned, more augmentation led to less time spent. More augmentation led to less feelings of ownership. We see this minimal impact to satisfaction with the final product, a slight positive effect for system 2. And we see this minimal impact to enjoyment while writing with a slight positive effect for system 2. We also see this increase in the amount of ease felt while writing ads. And we don't see any difference in terms of benefit by experience. And we have this finding that there's less augmentation, but less augmentation leads to a higher click-through rate. And this is interesting given that the observable measures that we look at are very similar between the different conditions. And so in terms of what we're looking at in terms of like what we consider to be ad quality, we don't see a substantial difference in the ads. So in terms of conclusions and future work, further investigation is needed into what's driving this higher click-through rate for the set of human written ads. We're also going to finish A/B testing the rest of the products. So we've A/B tested 4 out of the 17. And then we also want to examine skill versus experience. So one thing that we have is ratings of the writers on Upwork before they did the study. And we're interested in whether participants with higher ratings have any difference in terms of whether there is a different impact of the system in terms of treatment effect. And finally, we're interested in an experiment on the intersection of ownership and augmentation. And so wondering if the nature of the task is driving this ownership versus time spent trade-off. Thanks. And looks like we have a lot of time for questions.
Thank you, Zan. Does anybody have any questions? You can feel free to either put them in the chat or unmute.
Hi, Zanele. Really,
Hi.
really interesting. I just had a few questions, which I also did write into the chat for others to be able to see.
Yes.
So in terms of the click-through rate, is it in fact the case that the no AI condition does better than the slight augmentation, which does better than more augmentation, and that each one of these differences is statistically significant?
Correct.
Okay. So anytime you get help from AI, the click-through rate goes down even further.
Right.
Okay. And who created the example ads?
So the example ads are created by GPT-3.
Okay. Okay, so that wasn't like a human. Okay, got
No.
it. And then
No.
finally, are the Etsy folks told which condition their writer is in?
No. So the way that it works is that each Etsy, basically all writers write in every condition. And for an individual ad that the Etsy owners are shown, we don't tell them which condition that ad was written in.
But are they informed that there may be AI used in the creation of their ad?
Yes. Because yeah, the IRB felt that was important.
Yeah. No, it's not just that, but also just they may have an obligation to disclose that per the platform. I don't know the answer to that, but
yeah.
And doesn't that reveal which condition their writer is in?
No, because so the way that it works is that so a writer will basically write for a product in every condition. And so then they'll write 9 ads. So they'll write 9 ads for a product. And it'll be 3, 3, 3, each are written in each condition. And so basically an Etsy owner will have, for each of their products, they'll basically have between like 18 to 36 ads written for a given product. Does that make sense?
Sort of, but they know which ad used AI and which ad didn't use AI?
No, they just know that some ads might have used AI.
Okay, got it. Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions?
By the way, it looks like there are questions in the chat. I'm not sure whether you can see those or not, but I see
Yes,
Ryan
Ryan.
has a question and
Hi, yeah, this is Ryan Bertrand, and thanks so much for this research. And I recognize that this might not be a question that you can necessarily address with your findings completely, but as a copywriter myself, I wonder, why does ownership matter here? And I gather that maybe you're going to explore a little bit more of that in your further research. But can you say more about any impressions that you might have gathered from what you've seen so far?
Yeah, so one reason that ownership matters, so I think in the short term, ownership doesn't, in terms of like in the experiment itself, we might not think that ownership matters. We might think that like, okay, as long as the quality of the ads is equal, then ownership doesn't matter. But part of the reason this is interesting is because there's some other work in management that looks at creative work and the importance of ownership in terms of job satisfaction, and long-term quality and like attrition in terms of like continuing to produce creative work. And then there's also some interesting work that looks at kind of ownership over your work generally, not just in the creative work sense, and how that is related to basically like kind of long-term performance, and this idea of kind of feeling ownership, kind of buy-in, not only over your work, but as like an individual within an organization and how that can impact organizational outcomes. So the reason that it's interesting is more, to kind of motivate future work to think about like kind of, tying in with this prior work on ownership mattering, and also because of these prior findings that ownership is kind of an important measure when thinking about creative work specifically. But that's super interesting that you work as a copywriter yourself. I think,
and thank you so much for that, because that gives me insight into what you're looking at, which is job satisfaction, long-term quality, value of an individual within an organization, those sort of internal values where if I take a critical eye and say, okay, can Chat GPT eliminate me yet? And someone says, yes, we can actually fire Ryan because now we have this solution. They don't need to worry about job satisfaction, long-term quality, value within an organization. So those factors are removed in that scenario. And then my question about ownership becomes, does it have an impact on the quality of the content? And maybe not, but your research at least shows that there's some quality of this human content that has improved the click-through rate. So thank you very much. And it looks like Kevin has a question.
Oh yeah, Kevin.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so looking at the distributions, it's quite interesting that for all three conditions, you have a chunk of ads that seem to have gotten almost no click-throughs, and the difference is that you have this subset for the human written that did, and a much smaller subset for the other two. So I was wondering if you had thought about doing the ad quality comparison, not on the whole tranche, but on just that subset that gotten some amount of click-throughs. What's different about the human ads that are getting click-throughs versus the ones that don't, or the AI generated ones that don't? That might be a more important comparison.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and I think that's something that I haven't explored, but I think is kind of next on the list in terms of analysis. Because what you pointed out is right. We kind of have this like big chunk of ads that are in the human condition that do get this higher click-through rate, and this is really driving the increased median and mean. I think, especially considering that the ads that are written that have this higher click-through rate, the human written ads, those writers are also writing in the autocomplete and the example condition. So kind of especially looking at kind of writers that are writing these human written ads, kind of comparing the those high performing the writers who wrote these high performing ads, and looking at why is it that when they write with the AI, they are not writing the same level of high performance ads. Yes, could you say more about carryover effects? What are they and how did you measure? Yeah, so the carryover effects are basically a measure of how the ordering, like kind of how the order of the system, the treatments, sorry, how the order of the treatments is could be impacting the outcome variable. So you could imagine, like, for example, this is something that comes up a lot in kind of washout studies, where you might have somebody who's on the drug and then they're off the drug, or they're changing the order. You might be concerned that, like, having been on the drug before results in you having better outcomes when you're off the drug, if you are off the drug in the second period. And so the way that we measure this is in two ways. One is by essentially creating a variable that kind of set of dummy variables that are basically looking at was system 1 before system 3, and this was system 1 before the other systems in this particular session. So the way that you essentially like create that set of variables is by looking at like which sequence group I can pull up the sequence group slide, which sequence group each individual is in, and then for each outcome, for each session, you can look at whether in that given session, whether they had previously written, for example, in the example ads setting, if that makes sense. That was a bit confusing to explain. Here's another way to put it would be, suppose you wanted to look at what are the effects of having seen all of the example ads in that first writing session. So you might imagine, okay, you've seen all these example ads. So now once you get to session 2, when you are writing human only, you are human only, but you've been exposed to the AI already. So you want to see, are there carryover effects? And so for that session, so say the session was for session 2, you would say for that dummy variable, carryover from session 3 would be true. And then you're looking at the coefficient on that variable. And so what we did find was that there was some carryover from session, from having session 3 before sessions 2 and 1. But the upside of the fact that we were able to have these 6 groups is that we're able to control for these carryover effects so that it doesn't affect our estimate on the condition.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really interesting. I had a quick question about I thought it was interesting too, the readability difference in the first set of regression where we saw it versus the marketing criteria. Is there any do you have any insight over what kind of things are being measured between those that could like lead to the different, say, the sign flipping between those regression results?
I don't, to be honest, I'm not sure honestly why that's the case. I think there's probably some limitations to kind of a binary question of like simple language versus not, in terms of like maybe how that question is interpreted versus just like a readability in terms of grade score. So for example, like part of what readability is looking at is like the number of words in the sentence, which maybe when you're saying like this uses simple language, you might not consider that as being something that's kind of an important measure. But yes, I'm not sure. I think that's something to like look further into.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
I can pop in here. Hi, I'm Patrick from Sweden. I work in the web optimization space. A lovely talk. It would be, I'm just sort of curious on your thoughts about the autocomplete agent, because I mean that is an agent sort of on top of a large language model trained on sort of essentially trying to get a good rating in supporting people in answering their questions. And it would be interesting to hear your thoughts about how that affects the impact on click-through rate that you observed when it was used to sort of augment the copywriting.
I'm not sure I understand your question. So you're asking kind of how system 2 impacted click-through rate?
Yeah, no, so yeah, exactly. So system 2, I mean the example copy that it comes up with is the model that provides that is not trained on sort of a variable exemplifying the performance that this copy will have on click-through rate. And I was curious about your thoughts on whether or not introduction of that data into the data set for the training of the agent, how that would potentially impact the outcome here.
Yes. So yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So essentially, I would imagine that in a system where the AI system is developed in order to optimize for click-through rate, that you might expect that maybe the AI system 2 and system 3 would perform better. I think there's a challenge in terms of like how best to build such a system. One would be essentially like having a system that basically is like kind of doing like live A/B tests and is like or having a system that so when we primed the system, we did give when we fine-tuned the system, we did give them example ads, but these were example ads that you
don't know the click-through rate for.
Right. We didn't have a measure of click-through rate. We didn't actually have any measures of quality that we used for like fine-tuning the system. It was just these are Facebook ads. So
we could be in a situation where essentially platforms get an advantage when it comes to utilizing generated AI to sort of get better assistive tools, essentially, because they have this extra parameter to the data that is the parameter that most purchasers of copywriting would actually be interested in.
Right. I think one approach that already a lot of systems are taking are basically taking the human out of the loop and kind of in a way kind of throwing money at it. So if you basically just generate a bunch of ads, you can generate enough ads, and then you've got the kind of full loop. So you basically see which ads perform well, serve those more. It optimizes the system for creating ads that are more similar to the ones that are performing well. And so you might wonder, how do those ads compare to ads that are human plus AI written, given that the AI is then, limited, that in the setting that I used is more limited. I think the challenge with that is just not having a human in the loop for these types of ads is concerning, because sometimes the AI system will produce an ad that's offensive, not factual. And so if you kind of create a system like I described, where you are just looking for a highest click-through rate, you're going to miss basically ads that don't represent the brands. or are like kind of hallucinating attributes about the product. So for example, some ads that Etsy sellers vetoed were ads that said like there's a sale. Like there is no sale. That's just something that GPT-3 thought would be a good thing to put in the ad, because it had seen in the example ad that sometimes people would say there were sales. So that's, yeah, one, I guess, caveat to that approach.
That's a really interesting thought too. And is there a point where if the system is closed, all ads become the same ad? If you don't have any sort of human DNA coming into the system, and there becomes some sort of perfect ad that gets the best response, but then enough ads become like that ad that it ceases getting the best response. And so you have kind of this perfect ad, but then the target evolves as people start to see that more often.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think one thing that some people have been doing work on is looking at kind of are using these systems leading to like a homogeneity of writing and content that's produced, which if everybody's all using the same systems, then you might expect that to happen. But particularly in like this, like kind of in this kind of closed system, you might expect like kind of some sort of, you might be concerned there'd be some sort of even overfitting where they find like kind of one attribute to an ad that really makes it perform better, but in the but once this is deployed to like all ads, it's not as effective, it's not as unique or like eye-catching.
Great. Anyone else? We still have time for some more questions if there are any.
Yeah, I have a question. Did you control who these ads were exposed to, or were they just posted on Facebook and it was whoever happened to see them?
Yeah, so what I did was basically the copywriters essentially created what audience that their store was targeted towards. So for example, there's one seller who basically had various wedding related merchandise, and so basically this was like the ads were targeted towards individuals who were about to be married, essentially. And so basically like for a given product, we targeted the ads, all the ads in every condition towards their the audience that the Etsy sellers created.
Great, just a quick follow-on. So, and did the audience have any idea which ads were generated with which system?
No.
Okay. Because the reason I ask for that is, you know, there's a big issue around human favoritism and
Yes.
AI aversion. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Time for some more if anyone has any. All right. If not,
Hi.
Okay, go for it.
I think I have a question. So, if the presenter were to be a copywriter, what would be her takeaways for herself, or what would she have learned from this whole experiment as a copywriter?
If I was a copywriter myself, I think the main takeaway I would have learned is that I think that there is like a risk basically of over relying on the AI system such that the ad that you write without AI. So in the ideal, basically like in these human AI partnerships, basically you take like what the human does well and what the AI does well, and the combination of that partnership is better than what either of them would be independently. And so I could say strongly that I think that this human plus AI example is better than what the original example ads on their own without any human editing. Like that the quality of the ads of those ads are better, but the risk of basically using the AI system would be that the very high quality ads that you could produce you're producing basically lower quality work with the AI system if you over rely on the AI system and don't essentially don't incorporate your
Rely
human.
completely.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I have a question. Is there any plan to perform the similar study on like image ads or video ads?
No, though no, there's no plan to do that, but I think that would be a really interesting paper. There is, I think, my colleague has a paper that does look at image and video ads, but I think in this set of experiments, we're just looking at writing and text.
Gotcha. Yeah. For context, like I'm a startup founder. Like our company working on like using AI to generate video ads. So I'd be really curious about if there's some study about this field. Maybe later I can connect you offline.
Yes, yeah, and I can connect you to my colleague who has a paper about video ads.
Thank you.
Great. Still have time for one or two more if there are any.
So I'll ask a question. Thank you for the presentation. If knowing what you know now, if you could go back and restructure the study, would you tweak anything on the margin? Would you ask any different question? Just curious.
That's hard. There's a number, I mean, with any experiment, I think you kind of yeah, I think the best way to answer that is, looking at future work. I think just like thinking about like the nature of the task is important. And so we're like running other experiments that are with different tasks to try to see if the results differ based off of the nature of the task. So like in this study, this is, short form writing, but very short. It's like on average, as I can see what on average it is, on average about 57 words. So it's pretty short writing snippets. So what we did do was do like a series of interviews with people who were doing short story writing. Yeah, I think just broadly, like thinking about like kind of how do these results differ by the nature of task, I think is important. It would be interesting. And then, yeah, in terms of how I would change this study, I think yeah, just having a bit more insight from the Etsy sellers about kind of what it is about certain ads that made them veto them, or kind of the nature of their like rejection, so that we could look at like kind of what is happening in terms of is it like, can we categorize whether it's like frequently like hallucination of like non-factual information, whether it's offensive, that kind of outcome I think is important for thinking about like whether it's possible to do this kind of AI only like closed loop system.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Unless there's one more really brief one, I want to go ahead and thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and for joining us. And to everyone else, this is our last seminar for the semester, so we look forward to seeing you for the spring seminars, also Wednesdays starting early February. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks, Annalie. Really awesome work.